Hi guys, this is Crystal Roberts, and this is my second part of my Scrivener tutorial for Guppies. Today I'm going to go over a couple of things which hopefully will make your Scrivener writing experience much more productive. First, a writing tool you might find useful. If you go to the Edit menu, Writing Tools, and Linugistic Focus, click on that, and now you can choose a selection of types of speech that you can examine in your document. So for example, if you click on direct speech, and let's adjust the fade so you can see it a little better, you can look at only the dialogue in your document, which would be a great way to examine if your characters are speaking in a consistent voice. You can also highlight nouns, pronouns, verbs, adjectives, etc. Now let's take a look at the project menu. If you go to the project menu, you can look at a whole range of statistics about your book. How many words, how many characters, paragraphs. But down here, what I always find valuable is word frequency. I know that I have a habit of using certain words too often. And if I go through here, I can look and see when I did that. Also in the project menu is a writing history. So this will tell you how often you were writing, when, how many words you wrote. And for some people who love to keep a spreadsheet, you can export all this information. Now let me open up project settings. This is where you can see your list of labels, your list of status, your custom metadata, which we'll get to in a minute, your formatting, an autocomplete list if you have one, background images, and your backups. This is where you can tell Scrivener if you'd like your backups to be located in a different place. You'll notice I added to my label list rising tension and climax. So last week we talked about using labels if you wanted to identify POV. You can also use labels to identify what's going on in the story. So, for example, you'll notice that for these two documents, the first document I assigned rising tension as the label. The second document I also assigned rising tension. And then when Watson meets Holmes, I selected as climax. Another way you can see these labels is if you go to View, use label color in, say, binder, you'll see the colors here as well. Or if you go to View, show as background color in binder, you can see it in the binder as well. One final way of putting labels to good use is switching over to Corkboard mode and then clicking this button, Arrange by Label. And what you then have is a horizontal timeline with your scenes separated by label grouping and label color. So if you're looking to see which scenes have rising tension and which scenes have a climax, this is another way to look at that. Now remember last week I talked about split screens and did a vertical split? Well, if you want to do a horizontal split screen, you click on View, Editor Layout, Split Horizontally, and you can have a horizontal split. And one thing I like to do is have the outliner on top and my document on the bottom. Now, if I want to change the document on the bottom to match the outliner on the top, what I would do is click on the outline portion of the split, go to the Navigate menu, click on Outliner Selection Effect, Other Editor, and then you'll see that if I click on the scene in the outliner on the top, it changes to the corresponding document on the bottom. If I want to save this layout, I would go to the Window menu, Layouts, Manage Layouts, click the plus sign, give it a name, hit Enter, and now I have that new layout as a choice in my selections. Let's talk about comments. Comments can be added in the inspector as a separate list, or as inline annotations in your document. In the inspector, you click on the Comments and Footnotes button, click on the Add Comment button, and you'll notice a date and time. You can write your comment, keep the date and time, or delete it, and you'll notice that a highlight box is now in your text to show that a comment is associated with that text. If you'd like to add an inline annotation, you put your cursor where you'd like it to go, click on the Insert menu, Inline Annotation, and begin typing. You'll see that an annotation box appears with your text, and you can print and export your document with or without annotations when you're ready to do so. To delete the inline annotations, you simply delete the text in the box using the Delete button. Now let's talk about bookmarks. In the inspector, click on the Bookmark button. You'll notice I don't have any. Now you can choose to have a document bookmark that will only be associated with a particular document, or you can have a project bookmark, which you'll be able to see throughout your whole manuscript. You can have internal bookmarks from folders like your character sketches, place sketches, or your notes. You can have external file bookmarks, which reference files on your computer, or you can have external bookmarks that reference web pages on the internet. So I've already loaded a website in my browser, Murders You Might Not Have Heard About in Victorian England. I would drag and drop the web address from the address bar to my bookmarks window. And now I have this website in my bookmarks list. If I click on Load Web Page, that web page is now in my bookmarks section. Now let's talk about metadata. If you go to the inspector and click on the Metadata button, there's 3 separate sections. The first section is General Metadata, creation date and time, modified date and time, whether it should be included in compile for the document. These are all defaults. Let's close that for the moment. The first thing I want to start with are keywords. One writer wrote in her blog online that one of the keywords she uses for her mystery novels is the word gun. So for example, every scene that someone uses a gun in her novel, she attaches the metadata keyword gun. That way she knows which scenes to send to her gun expert to check and make sure that she's gotten everything right. So let's say we want 2 keywords for a study in Scarlet. If I go to Keywords and click on Show Project Keywords, a window opens. I'll click the plus sign. Let's say we want to add the word gun. I want to give it a distinctive color. Let's make it blue. And let's say for a study in Scarlet, we also want to add the word violin. So every scene in a study in Scarlet where Holmes plays a violin will attach the keyword violin. Now let's just say for argument that our first scene where Watson meets Stanford, there's a gun. So I'll go down to Keywords, click the drop-down menu, add a keyword, and there's the word gun. Now let's say where Watson meets Holmes, he plays the violin. Another way you can add keywords is just go to the scene, Holmes examines dead body, click the plus sign, and let's say we want the keyword to be body. So any scene throughout the novel that has a body in it will attach the keyword body. Now if we go to Outline View, so if you right-click on the heading bar, you'll see a selection for keywords. Now let's move it over so it's easier to see. And in fact, for now, let's just get rid of status to give us some space. So you'll see our keyword gun, violin, and body are now in our outliner section. Keywords can also be nested. So for example, if you had the word gun and you wanted to add a particular type of gun, you can do that as well. And there we go. Now let's click on Set Up Custom Metadata. This will bring us back to our project settings list under the Custom Metadata section. So one of the things I use custom metadata for is for characters. because sometimes I'll forget where I might have introduced a minor character. I might want to go back and change their description. And I found that having the custom metadata for characters helps me to do that really quickly. So for example, if I click the plus button and I create a metadata for characters, click enter, the type of metadata this is a text metadata. I can give it a specific color for the text, and I can align it a particular way. So let's say I want to make it red, and click OK. Now in this scene there are two characters, Watson and Stanford. So now you'll notice I have the characters section under custom metadata. So I can write Watson, Stanford, Watson, Holmes, Stanford. So once again, if you go back to the outline view, right click on the headings and add the metadata characters, move this over. Now I have a column for all of my characters in each scene. And as long as I fill those out, either while I'm writing or later, I can have a list of all of my scenes and all of the characters in them. Now let's say you want to add a checkbox. One writer whose blog I read said that what she does, she has a checkbox called Ready for Edit. Now if I click on this and make it a checkbox, click OK, right click on our headings and check off Ready for Edit. Now you'll notice that there's a checkbox for every scene. So once a scene is totally complete and ready to be sent to an editor, you can check it off. Let's say we chose the custom metadata Ready for Editor and created it as a list. We can then add choices for the list. Absolutely, maybe, hell no. Now when we click OK, and once again we right click on our headings, our Ready for Editor metadata now has its own column. Move it over. And now when we click on that, we have a choice. So absolutely this first scene is ready. This second scene, maybe. This third scene, hell no. Okay, so let's add one more. And let's call it Time of Action. And make it in the format of a date. This will be our format. And click OK. Now this, right click, Time of Action. Let's move it over. Now for mystery writers especially, this can be particularly important. If you click on it, Time of Action, you can assign that scene a time and date. Now suppose I wanted to edit one of these. Time of Action, I don't like that it's just the date. I want the time as well. If I go down to Format, say here, click OK. Now I know exactly the date and time of my scene. So not only can you see your metadata in the outline view, but if you click on search, you can choose to search just for metadata. So keywords in conjunction with the search function can be a very powerful tool. Now let's talk about compile. File, compile. Now you'll notice there are three sections. The format section, a section layout section, which will show you exactly what the sections will look like. And this section tells Scrivener exactly what you want to compile. If it's checked off, it'll be included in your final output. So if you want to compile your manuscript, and you can compile different sections if you choose as well, but for us right now, we're going to compile our manuscript. All right, and you'll notice that you have other choices up here, and these will change based on the selection you make over here. So for example, here, you'll have your title. Abbreviated title is what will show up in the header next to the page number. So right here, I put in Scarlet. Your author, forename, surname. This gives you settings that you can adjust based on if you're using comments and annotations. This is replacements. You can replace certain words while you're compiling. Depending on which selection you make here and what you're compiling for, you might have the choice of adding, if it's a PDF, adding a cover photo, or if it's for Microsoft Word, you won't have that choice. So a lot of things will change over here based on your selections here and here. Okay, so let's say you just want to output your manuscript, you want to read it, you want to see it on a page. The quickest and easiest thing to do is to select default format and PDF. So under default in section layout, the chapter section, if I click on that, you'll notice it's going to highlight the chapter sections here. The chapter section will look like this. And then if I click on scenes, you'll notice it's going to highlight scenes here because those are section types. They're scenes. This is what your scenes are going to look like as well. So if I click default and I click PDF and compile, I'll put it in my documents folder and export. This is what your manuscript will look like. So if you notice, the chapter heading looks exactly like this. And the scene format looks exactly like this. There are no headers, page numbers are at the bottom, and breaks in between scenes have a space. That's the default format as a PDF. Now let's say we did the default format as a Microsoft Word document. Changing nothing, it looks exactly the same. Okay, so now let's compile a PDF. As a manuscript times Roman. Now you'll notice that the section layouts have changed. The front matter now comes into play. Remember, our default for our novel template had front matter, which included a title page. So if you check this off, the front matter will be included. So everything here is checked off. All of these things stay the same for PDF. Now, the front matter will have a page break at the top, and the text will look like this, Times New Roman. The chapter heading, and you'll notice the front matter highlights title page, and that's front matter. The chapter heading will look like this. There'll be a page break, and chapters will be written as Chapter 1. Not Mr. Sherlock Holmes, but just Chapter 1. The scenes, as you'll see they're highlighted here, will be broken up by a hashtag in between each scene. Those are the section layouts for manuscript times. That's the default. So let's click compile. I'm going to give it the same name. Export, replace. Now you'll see that you have your title page included in this format, whereas you didn't have that in default. In your front matter document, you'll have filled all this in. Scrivener filled in the title, the author, and the number of words. Here's the header. Remember, I used the word Scarlet for the header, page number, and the author. Chapter 1 is the formatting. It doesn't include the name of the chapter. It just says Chapter 1. And between each scene is a single hashtag. That's the default setting. Now let's say you wanted to output as a paperback PDF. If you notice, once I select paperback, the front matter changes and adds these pages as the default. You now have 4 pages of front matter, and the front matter will look like this with a page break at the top. This will be the text. The chapter heading, which you notice are highlighted here, will simply have the number 1 with a page break at the top for the number of the chapter. And the scenes will look like this. Click Compile, Export, Replace. Now you'll see the difference. Here's your title page. Here's your copyright page, part of the front matter, your dedication, a blank page in between before the book starts, no chapter 1 written, just the number 1, and you'll notice the text looks like this. Now let's say you did paperback as an EPUB book. If you click on that, you notice these selections have changed. And over here, you have an additional selection for a table of contents if you'd like. And these selections are based on the fact that Scrivener assumes this will be read in an e-reader. The chapter heading will be written out as chapter 1, and the scenes will look like this. So let's compile. If you're on a MacBook, it'll take you to Apple Books, which will open up your ebook. And here's your contents, dedication page, and your chapters. And if, for example, you choose Kindle eBooks, it's going to ask you to download the Kindle Previewer because it has to be formatted specifically for Kindles. But this is what your formatting will look like. So let's go back to manuscript times. Let's say for my chapter heading, I wanted something different. If I click on Assign Section Layouts, now I have a couple of choices for these different types of formats in my manuscript. So for example, my chapter heading can look like this with a page break and written out as chapter 1, or it can be written out as chapter 1 and include my section title, or it can just have the section title alone. If I choose just the section title, it will say exactly what my section title is here. So if I click OK, you'll notice that it's changed here to section title for my chapter heading. Click Compile. And you'll notice that now the chapter heading is exactly how I labeled it in my binder. Now, one thing that is confusing is when you go to Assign Section Layouts. If I'm in the chapter heading section type, I'll still see selections for parts, chapters, and scenes. If I go to the Scene section, I'll see choices for parts, chapters, and scenes. I don't know why Scrivener does this, but it does make things a little confusing. So what I try to remember to do is if I'm in the chapter heading section, go directly to my choices related to chapters. Section title, heading, chapters. And if I'm going to front matter, for example, I go to the section relating to section text. Now, another choice that you do have is as is, and this will use the exact formatting that you have in your editor. Now, if you want to edit any of these default settings, so for example, let's say in scenes, I don't want an individual hashtag. Let's say I want 5 asterisks. What I then have to do is create a copy of this manuscript theme and change it in my copy. So for example, if I were to click on this to try and edit it, Scrivener would tell me that I need to duplicate the format and edit the layout. The other way you can do that is by coming down here, duplicate and edit format. So you notice that it gives it a name, copy. So I'm going to call it hashtag removal. Okay. Now, what I want to change is the separator. So I'll go to separators and I'll go to section text, and this is where that single hashtag is. And I'm going to make it custom, and instead of a single hashtag, I'm going to make it 5 asterisks. And then I change it in between blank line separator. And then you'll notice in my scenes, there are asterisks separating them. And if I click compile, here they are. Now, if you wanted to edit that format and say include metadata, synopses, and notes in your section text, if you check these off, click Save, and you scroll down here, you'll see that your scenes will now have metadata listed, synopsis, and notes, and the text. So let's see what that would look like. So here's your metadata, your synopsis, your notes from the inspector, and here's your text. Now let's say you wanted to print out an outline only. You can have just the synopsis with a chapter heading. So outline document and compile. So now you have an outline with your chapter heading, the heading of your scene, a synopsis from your inspector. Now in project settings, these are your default project setting types: scenes, chapters, headings, sections, front matter. And you can assign those in your metadata section in your inspector. So this is a scene. I can assign it as a chapter, but I'm not going to do that. And you'll notice it says something structure-based, which means that Scrivener is assuming, because this is a folder and this is a document inside that folder, the structure says that this is a chapter and this is a scene. That's what structure-based means. Now, as you can see, Scrivener Compile can be somewhat complex, but if you start off with the default formats, look at them in preview before you print, you can get a feel for what the changes are that you're making if you make different selections. Hopefully the Scrivener features I've been showing you will be helpful, and once you get back to work, you'll be able to put them to good use. Thanks for listening.